Howdy, my name is Joshua Richard, and today I'm going to talk about the topic of gear as a musician and why gear is probably not the most important thing, but I'm going to approach it with a different perspective compared to what most people talk about, which is the quality of the gear and about its being the player that matters. But I'm going to approach it from a completely different perspective that you'll probably enjoy hearing, especially if you're someone who doesn't really understand where the quality of gear matters, or if you're just curious about if gear matters at all. So, before I start, if you enjoyed this video, please give me a like and leave me a comment down below. And I would really love to talk to you about this, and I'll reply to every single comment. And as well, just subscribe to my channel. That really helps me grow and to reach more people. It tells the algorithm that people like watching my videos. So with that being said, I want to get on the topic of music gear, whether it's bass guitars, like I've got a couple here in the background just behind the camera, electric guitars, or any kind of gear that you could use for music. And I would argue this probably applies to more than just music as a like an industry. Like it applies to pretty much any area of life, but because I have more experience with the music side of things, I will start there, okay? So, does gear matter? That's the question. Usually people ask that question in terms of, people being either stingy about the quality or people want to choose more affordable options because they're just as good these days as, let's say, a higher end guitar model. So buying a Squier instrument, for example, is pretty much you're getting the same amount of quality as you would with a Fender, or at least that's the argument for the price of the instrument. I'm not gonna go into specifics about the argument. I'm just saying this for the sake of conversation. But the funny thing is, people are always concerned about gear, and most people are not really that concerned about character and personality, and that's something I think is severely understated in the music industry, in general, in any industry, I think. But I find we often prioritize the quality or price of our gear more than we prioritize who we are as people, how we treat other people in our circle or our industry, our music scene. And I think it shows when there's a band looking for a drummer, for example. Most of the time they're not expecting, well, I can't speak for everyone, but most of the time they're not expecting this perfect drummer who plays on time 100%, and they never miss a note, and they can play like the craziest double bass pedal, like all the craziest fills, like blast beats. All of that stuff is cool, of course. There's nothing wrong with being a crazy talented drummer, but the interesting thing for me is that the personality of the drummer, whether they fit in with the band, they get along with everyone, they treat everyone right, they treat everyone with kindness. I think that's a bigger problem than actually finding good talent these days. You'll see a lot of people talking about bad experiences with musicians who are just either on a high horse, they're arrogant, or maybe they're just lazy, maybe they have, I don't know, they have issues with personal problems, they have all kinds of things, like legal issues, like, I don't know, maybe they steal stuff, or the point here I'm trying to make is that you'll find a lot of these bands are frustrated. A lot of musicians in general are frustrated because they can't find good people. And I had a mentor that said his his philosophy was kind of good, talented musicians are a dime a dozen. But a musician who does the necessary work, pulls their own weight, shows up with a smile on their face, and doesn't complain about what they have to do, and otherwise treats everyone with respect and, is kind. I think that's far more important than asking, is my instrument good enough to play in this band? And I think that cannot be overstated, in my opinion. You know, the amount of people who are more concerned with what kind of fretboard they have on their bass guitar, or how many different sounds their synth keyboard can make, or what kind of customizations they can make to whatever kind of gear. Like, doesn't matter. You can insert X instrument in X band. It's like, at the end of the day, people don't want to hire someone for their instruments. Now, in some cases, it might be necessary to have a certain level of gear, but even then, I would argue that even at high level professional, even touring bands that are, doing national, international touring, their band leader, their bandmates are not looking for someone who has the greatest instrument, or, man, even someone who has like cool stuff. Honestly, it's way more important to just be a good person to be around, someone who adds energy to the room instead of takes energy, who's constantly draining to be around, someone who's always complaining. And yeah, I'm very passionate about this because people are more concerned with the quality of their instrument than how they treat other people in their band, or in their local music scene, or in their, their musician circle, like their circle of friends. I think it's pretty sad too, because there are a lot of people who have serious potential to do music, and they're very talented people, but unfortunately so many musicians bring so much negativity and baggage and all of that stuff. And I'm not trying to say anyone should try and be perfect, anyone has to be perfect, but I think we've got the priorities wrong here. There's nothing wrong with wanting a nice electric guitar or a nice interface if you're a producer or anything like that, but I would strongly suggest, if you're watching this, to prioritize how you treat people instead of worrying about how expensive your gear is. People will treat you better for being a kind person, or telling them a joke just to make them laugh, just to make their even just to make a single moment of their day better. You'll get further doing that than you will with the most high-end custom built, Balaguer guitar. If you're familiar with Balaguer guitars, they're just a custom guitar manufacturer. They build really nice guitars. I would love to have one of those someday, but it's pretty expensive, and obviously the quality shows in the price. But even if I were to buy one of those, I'm still going to do my best. I'm going to go out of my way to treat people with respect, because I know my guitar doesn't make their lives any better. It doesn't make people feel good in whatever kind of anxiety they might be feeling in that moment. You know, when you're playing live as a band, there's a lot of anxiety, there's a lot of stress. Everyone involved is going through something that you're not aware of, or maybe you are. And I would even argue, if you are aware of someone going through something, like, your guitar's not going to help them. Your drum set, your, $2,000 snare, or, you know, none of that stuff really matters in the grand scheme of things, other than just like a metric for how much money you're able to spend on an instrument, or whatever kind of instrument that people think is cool, right? So, yeah, I think it's important to start prioritizing how you treat people. Who you are as a person is so much more important than the gear you have. Treating people nice, treating people with kindness, respect, dignity, it goes so much further than just what your instrument says about you. You know, people don't want to see you show up with a nice guitar and then, you yell at people on set, or you get frustrated with them over insignificant things. There's bound to be some frustrations at some point anyway. So if you're adding to that kind of, I guess, that environment of stress, and just think about this for a moment. If you're having a bad day, just think about a recent bad day that you had. You wake up, maybe you're exhausted from the night before. Maybe you're stressing out over exams, or maybe you're just struggling to pay the bills for the month. I know I'm there right now, and I've been there many times before. And imagine someone coming into your day. Basically, someone who you're working with, and imagine this person is really rude, or they always tell, kind of like uncomfortable jokes, or anything that would really bring you like a level down where you're already in kind of a bad state of mind. Just imagine being that type of person on stage, or really anywhere in a band environment or a musician's environment. If you're a producer, if you have a client who you're working with and they're already having a bad day, imagine being that person, being in their shoes, and how that would make them feel if you were to, I don't know, even just say simple things like even just like kind of backhanded compliments, or like off-color jokes. Like, I think that actually has more of an effect on the person and how they perceive you than how much gear you have. I can show you all the gear I have in my studio right now, but it's like, I would rather just treat you like like a regular person, and not try to add stress to your already complicated life. I've heard many times that, I've read like posters, or like Instagram posts, where it's like, everyone you meet has a life that's just as complicated, as complex, and just as important as you do. So imagine treating someone who has the same kind of struggles in life that you do. Imagine treating them the way that you currently treat people. I would say that's a good gauge for if it would make you feel better. You're probably on the right track with how you're treating people. But if you imagine this scenario where you're having already a bad day and you have so many things to think about in your life, if the way you're treating people now in your music scene would add more stress to you in that situation, I would strongly suggest that you consider that maybe you shouldn't be so focused on what gear you have and start thinking about treating people the way you would want to be treated, especially if you're in a situation where people don't really know what you're going through, you know? That's the hardest part of it, I think, because if you've ever had a bad day, but you've had to kind of keep it inside, you've had to hold back from complaining to anyone, and not just because it's not significant, but it's more of like you've just kind of got to deal with things sometimes. But we often can't tell people exactly what we're going through for one reason or another. And so I want you to imagine everyone that you come across is dealing with that sort of situation right now. Whether they are or they're not, you want to treat them with the same level of decency and respect as you would if it was you in that same situation. You want to give them the same energy that you would want if you were in their shoes. So I think this is a highly unspoken and completely underestimated perspective on music gear. So many people prioritize the cost of their instrument. So many people prioritize how good it sounds or how it looks, and a lot of it's just vanity, honestly. If we're being honest with ourselves, we already know what we like. I know that I like my Fender jazz basses. I know that I like my 8-string guitar that's right behind the camera here as well. I know I like my Mac Studio, but at the end of the day, it's not really about impressing other people. Well, that's cool and everything. It's like, at the end of the day, do you want people to remember you as someone who had a cool guitar, a cool microphone, an expensive microphone? Or do you want to be someone who people think back and remember you as a moment in their day where they just got to be themselves? They just got to enjoy the moment and not stress so much about everything that's going on in their lives. I think this is far more important, far, far more important than what kind of pickups your guitar has or what gauge strings you use. And this whole conversation can be, broadened out into the greater picture of, reliability and dedication to the work and willing to go the extra mile. Like, those are all things that add on to the experience that you give other people when you're with them. And I think that's the most important thing, is how do people perceive you when you're around them? And I just want to finish here because, yeah, there's way more to be said about this, but I think I'll leave it here for now. And before I go, however, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for watching my videos. Thank you for subscribing. But I also want to say I am a solo punk rock acoustic musician. And I also run this YouTube channel that you're watching now, Joshua M. Richard. This is my personal channel where I just film videos that are basically just things that I don't necessarily have a proper outlet for anywhere else. I like to talk about these more meaningful conversations on my YouTube channel because I don't I don't really have anyone to talk about this with. That's why I always ask you to leave a comment below, because I genuinely just want to find other people who care about this stuff like I do. Oh, hey! My dog just got up from her bed. So yeah, leave a comment, but also before you go, I just ask you one thing. If you want to support me, literally the best way that you can support me as a creator in my creative life, in my musical life, with my solo acoustic punk rock project. I write the music, I record it and produce it all myself. And even if you buy one single from my website, or if you buy my entire discography, it helps a huge amount to help me pay my bills. Because at the moment, I'm just looking for creative work. I'm doing everything that I can to pay my bills. And, part-time or full-time work is kind of difficult. I'm trying to make the life of a creator a reality in my own life. So it would mean a whole lot to me if you go to my website, monsterswhosleep.com/music. I will link it down below. If you buy any of my music, it seriously helps me so much more than you even realize. So with that being said, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoyed this kind of topic where it's more of a philosophical or I guess lifestyle rather than just gear, learning about guitars or hearing about the quality of instruments. I'm sure you are all familiar with that on some level. Anyway, give this video a like, leave me a comment below. I will seriously reply to every single comment. If you want to have a conversation, that's the best place to do it for now. And please subscribe and share my channel. It helps me grow and to reach more people, and that way I can hopefully help more people out with conversations like this. Thank you so much for watching. Take care.